Hello folks and welcome to our game with myself, Shane Stapleton, and joined for a Munster hurling preview. We've got Michael Ryan, former Waterford manager, former Westmeath manager as well. We're going to have Joe Quaid on in a while also. We'll just start off with you, Michael. How are things?
Not too bad at all, no.
You're keeping the good
looking forward to the championship. Everybody's looking forward to the championship. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, let's go back a few years. It's probably a decade ago now that you were starting into your first season. Well, was it 2012 your first season with
12
Waterford?
and 13, yeah. 12 and 13, yeah.
Can you talk to us about what it was like building into that first season when you were in charge of Waterford? No doubt, you know, a lover of the Dacia your whole life, and then building into that first championship season. What was that like for you personally?
Well, we didn't have a really good start to the league. We lost the first couple of games in the league, but then we recovered and we beat Galway and we beat Dublin. So I suppose it was a bit into the unknown, and to make it even more interesting, we were playing Clare in the first round, and Davy had just stepped down as Waterford manager, and he went to Clare, and lo and behold, I suppose it was inevitable that we draw Clare in the first round. So, you know, it was an interesting time, and there was a big build up to that game because of the fact that Davy was a Waterford manager previously, but I think every year the championship brings something new, and it's what every player and every manager dreams to be involved in the championship. So, you know, you just can't wait to get the first game under your belt, and nobody knows what's going to happen in the first match, because the league is the league and the championship is a different kettle of fish. It's a very serious competition. So I suppose there was a bit of anticipation when I took over. There was a bit of, you know, the unknown, really, so to speak, but very much looking forward to it. And I think that's the way everybody is.
And would you have sort of prepared what you were going to say in the dressing room beforehand, or do you just let it flow? Whatever comes out, comes out?
No, I'd have to think about it, and it depends on the circumstances. I mean, it depends on it's championship game, it's a league game, it's first round, or I would certainly mentally prepare for it, and I suppose a lot would depend on how training had gone during the week, and also whether we admit it or not, the opposition will also come into play as well. So I'd like to think that would be a factor in what a manager was going to say. And certainly in my case, I can't speak for anybody else, but in my case, I would mentally prepare for it, definitely, yeah.
Yeah. And was that the day, look, all this water has gone under the bridge at this stage, but was that the day when Davy Fitz, John Milan and Owen Kelly had their bit of John on the sideline? I
just knew you were going to bring that up, yeah.
Well, that was the
day. That was the day, yeah, no question about it. To be honest about it, I wasn't particularly happy about it at the time. I didn't think it was the thing to do, but look, the game was over. I suppose there was a bit of emotion involved from the players' point of view as well, and Davy had been manager, and Davy had a good spell as Waterford manager, has to be said. They won the Munster Championship in 10, and I suppose, like everything, it seemed to maybe sour a little bit in the end, and I don't exactly know what happened, but certainly the two lads anyway got stuck into it, and as I said, certainly wasn't in favour of it. I wouldn't agree with it, but nevertheless, it was completely out of my control.
What were those players like for you in the dressing room, and I suppose on the pitch as well?
Yeah, look, they were good lads. I mean, some of those players had been part of a very successful Waterford team. They had won 3 Munster finals, 4 Munster finals in some cases. And I'd also been a selector with Justin McCarthy back in 2007, 2008, so I would have known him from that point of view. But good lads. I mean, fella like Milan, the dressing room, was a top guy. You know, I mean, and Owen Kelly was a really talented player. I don't think Owen Kelly I think he could have got more out of his career, but was a really talented player. We had fellas like Stephen Malumpy, who was a manager's dream, really, because he was a leader. He was a guy who led the troops. He was a guy who went into battle with, you know, when you went into battle with Stephen Malumpy, you felt you had a really good man on your side. A lot of good players in that team. And we had 2 very enjoyable years.
Did you have any, you know, was it unusual for you at all taking over the job, given, you know, how the Justin McCarthy era had ended?
No, I mean, Justin McCarthy's era ended in 2008, and this was 2012, so it's 3.5 years later, 4 years later for one. You know, so I mean, that time had gone. A new manager had been in. Waterford had been to an All-Ireland final, even though they were well beaten by Kilkenny, and there were several new players on the panel as well. So really, that had no impact on me taking over. Certainly didn't factor, as far as I was concerned, anyway.
And like, if you go back to 2007, that All-Ireland semi-final, Waterford against Limerick, 16 years on now, obviously, but do you think that extra game that Waterford had to play against Cork took a bit out of the legs, and that explained the ambush from Limerick?
Well, I think, you know, I mean, I don't want to be unfair to Limerick now, because on the day they played really, really well, and there was a few chinks in our team and they exposed them. Like high ball into Beckley at full forward, he causes massive problems. I don't know, maybe I suppose we had beaten Cork in a replay. and we had beaten Limerick early on in the championship. So I suppose maybe there was a very slight hint of complacency. I don't know. Maybe there was, and also there was the fact of going to Croke Park 3 times in 2 weeks. I think Limerick could sit back and watch Waterford play and analyse it, and they had a really good team as well. And from that point of view, I think they were probably caught in the headlights. But on the day, we just didn't play well enough to win the game. I remember distinctly, we knew after 15 minutes we were a little bit off the boil. They looked like they could score goals. And in All-Ireland semi-final in Croke Park, his goals are going to be crucial. And they had that in their locker. And they had some really talented players as well right around the pitch. But from their point of view, I think it was a day that every single Limerick player had an 8, 9 out of 10. And unfortunately for us, that didn't happen for us on the day. Now, we had 2 really good days against Cork and 2 magnificent games. And I had to pull it out of the fire, particularly the first day when we got the late free from Owen Kelly to draw the game. And when Don Lowe I think it was alleged to have fouled the ball or lidden the ball. But we put a lot into those 2 games. I'd say certainly it was a factor, but I wouldn't want to take anything away from Limerick on the day. They played really, really well, and they looked to have our measure right from the throw-in.
It's very difficult as a manager, isn't it, to sort of change things mid-flow. Like if a game has taken on a certain a style, tempo, life of its own, whatever you want to call it, it's very, very difficult in like a game where there's 30 players out in the field. It's not like soccer where you can sort of make 1 or 2 switches and change the flow. Like at hurling, it's chaos. How do you throw one lad into, to kind of stem that?
Yeah, and for something to work, for some particular reason, we had a few fellas off colour on the day, and that's the end of the day. Played a lot of good hurling for Waterford, and we made a few changes on the day that didn't seem to affect the thing, and we walked our way back into it a couple of times. But every time we walked our way back into it, they seem to get a goal, and it's not like a light switch, or a tap. You can't just turn it on anytime you like, and I suppose. And maybe there was a very slight hint of complacency. I'm not saying there was, but maybe there was. People expected us to win, and as we know over the years, Waterford don't deal well with the tag of favouritism. So, but we simply wasn't good enough on the day, and that's the reason we lost the match.
Couple of positive comments in for you already. Jesse James says Michael Ryan, absolute gentleman, and Popo says up Michael Ryan, one of our greatest managers in Waterford. So the compliments are flowing in already for you, Michael.
I'm sure there's a few on the other side as well, but anyway, we'll see what happens.
I've deleted them and I've blocked them.
Good man.
You're a couple of years in charge though. Like, it's a decade ago now at this stage. Like, how do you reflect on it?
Well, I really thought we won a good place tonight. We played Kilkenny in Thurles. It went to extra time, and Pat Flanagan was doing the physical for us, and then Pat strength and conditioning. And we had a meeting after. We felt we were in a really, really good place because we had physically stood up to the challenge of Kilkenny on that particular night. They had made a number of changes. I think Henry was actually taken off in that particular game, and they just got us an extra time. But we really thought we were in a good place going forward. But unfortunately, the things didn't work out. But look, I've no regrets about it.
Kevin Moran in that game, he was an absolute phenomenon, and he got sick on the pitch and everything, didn't he? Just through the effort he'd made.
Yeah, well, I was involved with Kevin Moran, I suppose, with club and county, because I managed Jealous and we won the Munster club in 2010 as well. So, he's had a lot of good games for Waterford, but I think that was probably his best ever game because he covered every blade of grass. When we needed a vital score, he got a vital score, and from way out in the sideline, and he got another point after that. He had a phenomenal game, and he's been a phenomenal player. Always a bit of debate about where was his best position. I think even though he played successfully at midfield, it has to be said, and I remember in his very first game was down in Wexford Park against Wexford in a league game with Justin. We started him full forward on that particular day. But I've always felt the half-back line, particularly left half-back, I thought he could really influence the game because he could really deliver good ball into the forwards, and he was good under the high ball as well. So I always felt that was his best position. But on the day, he gave an absolute 9.9 out of 10. I don't do 10 out of 10, but he was 9.9 on that particular day, and he left every blade out. Actually, he had to be carried from the pitch. He was so exhausted. Yeah,
it was incredible stuff. Of all the players that you would have managed, in your own tenure and obviously under Justin's as well, can you tell us what sort of talent did you see in training? Because we're talking about Waterford's best ever players here: Dan Shanahan, John Milan, Ken McGrath, for God's sake, Paul Flynn, and so on.
Yeah, well, that Waterford team with Justin, and Justin did an excellent job as manager, that has to be said. That was a very driven group of individuals who always wanted to perform. They loved the big stage. They wanted to play well. I mean, people like Ken McGrath, Tony Brown, they were top-notch guys. Milan was phenomenal, and I had Milan at club level as well. And but they were just really good players who were prepared to work really hard. And I often think, that they were probably a little bit unlucky because They were around at a time, in Justin's point of view. Cork were going for 3 in a row. Kilkenny had their best ever team. And, and Waterford trying to make the breakthrough. And sometimes you come up a little bit short than that, but really, really close. But didn't actually pull it off on the really big day, which is disappointing for them because they certainly had enough talent to win in All-Ireland. But you can also say, if you get what you deserve, I suppose people will cynically say that. I wouldn't say that. I thought they were top-class players, very ambitious, really, really proud to wear the Waterford jersey. Maybe if there was a slight flaw in the forward line with a lot of individuals, and maybe we never quite put it together as a team. That maybe that last pass was missing because they all fancied a shot at the post. But 3 or 4 of them did anyway. Seamus Prendergast and Steve Malumpy were different. They all fancied a shot at the post, but really good lads, and I couldn't speak highly enough of them.
What are your thoughts on Stephen Malumpy as Kerry manager? He seems to have done quite well so far.
Well, Stephen is a very driven guy, and he will realise that when you go to a county like Kerry, I was in Westmeath myself. There's no quick fix to it. You've got to build something, and sometimes that takes time. And very often people don't realise that it takes time, and or they mightn't be happy that it takes time. But if Stephen Malumpy gets a go in Kerry, if he gets proper time in Kerry, I've no doubt he'll significantly improve that team, and it'll be very interesting to see how they get on in this year's Joe McDonagh.
And here's Joe Quaid. Joe, how are things?
How are you, lads?
How are you, Joe?
How are you, Michael?
Good, mate. Good. Great time to be a Limerick man, Joe, isn't it? It's a great time to be a Limerick man.
Well, we've had enough bad years, Michael.
Yeah, I know that.
We're damn glad of it now.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, Joe, are you excited heading into this weekend? I mean, everyone just assumes that Limerick are going to hit top gear and that they're going to beat Waterford this weekend, Joe.
Look, I suppose we're around long enough to know that every team is beatable. League and championship are completely different things. Are they favourites? Yeah, they're red-hot favourites. And the one thing, I suppose, that catches Red Hot's favourites is complacency. Now, I can't see the likes of John Kiley and Paul Kinnerk and them guys allowing the players to be complacent. And I suppose the one thing that really helps it is the strength and depth of the squad. If you're not performing, if you're a bit complacent, it looks like there's somebody as good, if not better than you to come in. So I suppose that rules that out.
Michael, what are your thoughts heading into this weekend? Do Waterford go up there more in hope than expectation, I should say?
Well, everybody expects Limerick to win the game. And as Joe correctly said, they're red-hot favourites. And they deserve to be red-hot favourites. And based on the evidence in this year's league, and I read a comment from one of the players lately saying it's the first time they had all 37 players injury-free. But we shouldn't be forgotten that this time last year, exactly today, 12 months ago, Waterford were league champions. They were rated the second best team in the country. They didn't lose all that ability overnight. They certainly didn't have a good championship last year, but they had a good 2.5 years before that under Liam. So I think there's a lot of good players on the Waterford team. But to go to Thurles and to win that game is certainly a big ask because Limerick are flying. They have all the options. And just one point I want to make, Joe. I remember discussing this with you some time ago. This must be very satisfying for you because I know you were involved in the early ages of that development plan for Limerick. And I remember meeting Joe McDonagh down in Waterford. He spoke about 2010 that something had to be done in Limerick, and they put a package together. They put a system in place. I know you were part of that place. You were part of that as well. So it must be really satisfying for you now to see the way those players have developed and come on and are top of their game at the moment.
Yeah, look, I suppose I think was it 9 of the All-Ireland winning panel came out of a team we had from under 14s, 15s, 16s, which I suppose is unprecedented. You get a golden crop. But look, there's no guarantees down the road. It's a long way from under 14s to senior All-Ireland winners. But we definitely saw something in them. They're not only their hurling, more so their mindset, their application, their attitude, and their willingness to learn. Like, we didn't win the Forrestal. We didn't even qualify for this out of our group. We won a Shield under 15, but we won the All-Ireland 16s. I think we beat Galway in the final something like 320 to 8 points. Now, the other side of that is, at 14s, 15s and 16s, probably the top 2 teams in the country at that age group were Limerick and Waterford. And there was absolutely nothing between us. Some of the best hurling matches I've ever seen have been underage matches between Limerick and Waterford. So it's not really a surprise that Waterford last year, especially coming to Limerick, Everyone was nervous about them. They'd won the league. They were flying it. And they went toe-to-toe. And look, realistically, it was only the last 10, 15 minutes of that game that Limerick pulled away. So anybody that thinks that this is going to be a walk in the park on Sunday is highly mistaken. I know for the last 10, 15, 12 years, I suppose, since we had the lads, that Waterford are there. They have the work put in. I know we had the development squads and everything, but Waterford had them too. Probably not in the same scale, Michael, but they definitely had them. They had the players. Like I remember seeing Patrick Curran underage was one of the best I've ever seen. Billy Nolan was in goals for that team. You know, you'd Ozzy and the Bennetts then coming before and after. You know, there's serious talent there.
And Michael, is it continuing to come in Waterford? Because you've been involved with the minors and under-20s.
I don't think, look, we certainly don't have our best ever teams at minor and under 20 at the moment. There's a few individuals on those teams who will probably come through and make good senior players. You have Mark Fitzgerald and Pat Fitzgerald, currently part of the senior panel. We certainly wouldn't be as good as it was a few years ago. It was exceptional a few years ago, but it should be remembered that under 21 team that won the All-Ireland is now 26, 27 years of age. So I mean, their time is now or never. So I mean, the next year or two is going to be absolutely crucial for them, and something needs to happen quickly. There's no doubt about that.
And what about the injury situation for Waterford? There's talk of the likes of, when will Ozzy be right and that sort of stuff. Is that going to hamper Waterford a lot this weekend?
Well, I always worry when managers start talking about injured players because you never really know what's happening. Now, I was speaking to Austin Gleeson about 3 weeks ago. I actually met him down in Carriganore, and he certainly was carrying an injury. And Shane McNulty was in a boot. He was injured as well. So whether there'll be a miraculous recovery or not, I don't know. The story out in Waterford is that there's 3 players out of that particular game. Yellow Daly as well. They're supposed to be missing. And if they are, they'd be a big loss because we don't have the panel of players that Limerick have. And it was very interesting. I read a comment from Garrod Hegarty the other day, and he spoke about the change on the Limerick panel over the last 4 or 5 years. But the change of the Limerick panel has really been on the bench. I mean, they haven't lost any of their big guns. And, people like Nash has come through and playing cornerback, playing the best Hurling ever played. They haven't really lost any of their big guns. And they seem to be able to cope when people are missing. So, they still have a serious panel. Their panel is better than anybody else's. And that's the reason why I think they'd be very difficult to beat.
Do you think, Michael, that last year when Waterford put everything into that Limerick match, Limerick were down 3 or 4 players, Keane Lynch going off and so on, that mentally that sort of broke Waterford for the rest of the year?
Look, well, Waterford in the championship, they played Tipperary and they got over the line, and Tipperary missed 3 chances they could have won it. Waterford did play well against Limerick, there's no question about that. And I think the Cork game, Waterford expected to win the Cork game, and maybe even Cork expected Waterford to win the game. But on the day, Cork got off to a good start. We had a few injuries. We didn't perform well on the day, and Cork came down. And when Cork get on top of you, they're very, very hard to beat. And then suddenly the whole thing fell apart. And the game up in Clare was a set into the championship for Waterford. But probably the Limerick game, maybe I wouldn't say give them a false sense of optimism, but it made them think they were very, very close. But when you're very close, you've got to follow it up in the next game. And Waterford didn't do that in the next game.
Joe, Barry Nash was mentioned there a short while ago. Is there a more improved player at inter-county level than this man?
Look, I suppose a lot of the credit has to go to John Kiley. There a couple of years ago when he put him in cornerback in the first match, I don't think he was overly great. And probably a lot of managers would have probably either whipped him off or not started him in the next match. Like, no one questioned his ability, but he was being thrust from being a forward back into what I would consider probably one of the most specialised and hardest positions to play in as a cornerback. But John and the lads seemed to put huge faith in him that he was going to come good. And oh my God, I think I tweeted about it last at the league final. I said, imagine going out, I said, and as a corner forward, and your man that you're marking has 1-1 got from play, and you're playing into a strong breeze. It's kind of ridiculous. My father used to always say to me years ago, if we played a match, how many goals did you let in? And I'd go, none. And he'd go, you were beaten 4-10 to whatever. I said, I didn't let any of them in. I said, they were scored. I said, so I said, the game has changed so much, and look, I don't know how you would counteract it. I've heard people saying play 4 in the full forward line, play 3 in the full forward line, press up on them. But you do that, then you're exposing yourself at the back. If you drop a sweeper, they'll just bypass you and hit 30 points. If you pull out, they'll put ball into some of the most lethal forwards in the game. It's just hard to see. And yeah, teams have got at him. Galway last year, to me, probably was one that could have gone. And to be fair to the final last year, I would definitely say Brian Quaid got every last drop out of that Kilkenny team last year. And if Kilkenny had beaten us last year, I would have turned around to people from Kilkenny alongside me and said, fair play. It was well deserved. So they can be got at. The one thing that is hugely in Limerick's favour is they don't do panic. I think Dan Morrissey was interviewed after the match last year and someone asked him, probably one of the last plays of the game, a ball was back in the cornerback position. He picked it up. He hand passed it out to somebody, went on, took the return pass, passed it again. They put it down in the corner and they closed the game out. And most players would have just, when Dan got the first ball, would have just lamped it down the field. And they said, why did you do that? And his answer was, that's what we do. You know, so they don't do panic. They don't deviate away from the plan. Has been seen with the Tip match a few years ago. They're down, what are they, 10 or 12 points at half time. They don't do panic. They just readjust.
You had to bring that up.
Come here, I'm sick of telling you to take off them blue and gold goggles.
But the question I want to ask both of you, and I'll just start off with you, Michael, and Joe, you might take up the point, about how coaching might have changed over the years. So, like, I think of when I was a young lad and I'm first hurling, everything is blood and thunder, set fire to the ball, drive it up the field, all that kind of stuff. But the difference now, like Joe has just explained with that Dan Morrissey situation, is you're now coaching calmness on the ball. Like, is that something that you noticed you'd have changed in your approach, Michael?
Yeah, I think the game has changed significantly in the last 10 years. So just going back to Limerick for a moment, I think from the outside looking in, it seems to me that Limerick work on the basis that they never need goals to win a game. They work on the premise they're going to have 40 shots at the post and they score 30. But that's what they're doing most of the time. They look so comfortable on the ball. They use the ball so well. They never panic. They get the ball to the shooters. They get the ball to the man in the best position. And then inevitably they pull the trigger. But they're never forced to do something they don't want to do. And that's a sign of a good management. It's a sign of good players. It's a sign of a good system. And the composure they have is absolutely fantastic. But then they're so adaptable as well. I mean, you can throw Kyle Hayes in full forward, centre forward, wing back, doesn't make a difference. Barry Nash, absolutely. I mean, his career wasn't exactly on fire when he was playing up the field and moved back to corner back, and they attacked from the back. And if you notice, I'm not surprised by this, because Paul Kinnerk would have a bit of a football background. And an awful lot of Limerick's play is support play, like football, like the three-man weave coming off the shoulder. They attack from every position on the field. And when they attack, somebody else inevitably starts back and covers. So that's something that's changed in the game. There's no question about that. I think Brian Cody was part of an era. He picked big men for Kilkenny and they tried to fight the battle in the sky. High ball, win high ball, win high ball all day long. And inevitably didn't get a score. But now the game is, different teams are using different methods to try and play the game. And the only chance you have against Limerick is trying to use the ball, because if you go into a physical battle against Limerick, they're just going to be steamrolled. You have no chance because of their physique. They're big men. They're 6'4", 6'5". But two things to add to that: they're really good athletes and they're really good hurlers. So certainly the game has changed. There's no doubt about that. And from a manager's point of view, I suppose Davy's trying to come up with a plan. And in fairness to him over the years, he says he's come up with some really good plans. He did win All Ireland with Clare, won the Leinster with Wexford. But this is going to be the acid test now, because, you know, watching Waterford play the league, Jesse Hutchinson's out on the middle of the field. We don't know what's going to happen next. Has he something in the bag that he's going to pull out on Sunday, which will certainly be an acid test?
We'll come back to the game itself on Sunday shortly. But Joe, just in terms of how you look at coaching now versus 10 years ago, and like, are you coaching very differently these days? Like, I'd even think teams are looking at not just Gaelic football, but also the likes of soccer and playing in triangles and stuff like that.
Well, and look, I'm not taking full credit for it, but when we had that bunch in 2010, every training session we did, we emphasised your first your first option. There was a first option and a first touch. Your first touch was with your hurley if you couldn't get the ball to your hand. That was we drilled into them. That was your first option. Ball to hand, ball to hand, ball to hand. And they've continued that through. So we had 3 years of them. I used to drive them queer at training because if some...
Oh, we lost Joe there, but what would you look at in terms of, like, when you're coaching now and you're involved at the 20s there, do you have certain influences where you take inspiration from other sports?
Well, we put a lot of emphasis on using the ball properly, and we had a really gallant band among the 20s, but we just didn't have the firepower up front to get scores. We missed 3 clear-cut goal chances against Limerick, 3 1-on-1s with the keeper. When the Cork game was in the melting pot, we had 4 wides in a row, and look, that's not blaming anybody. We just don't have natural fouls at the moment, and you're always trying to make up. But the lads were coaching the team. They put a big emphasis on Ray and Pay, put a big emphasis on using the ball well and try and create chances and not to panic when we're on the ball. But sometimes it comes down to the individual itself, because you can do all the coaching and you can do all the work behind the scenes, but on the day, the player on the pitch is going to have to make decisions, and sometimes those decisions work out. But we were very disappointed with the Clare game because we were well beaten against Clare, and Clare were pretty beaten by 5 points by Cork again lately. So there's no real form in the whole thing. But we would have put a lot of emphasis on using the ball well and combination play and walking the ball through the lines.
I see a comment in here from PWell74. Joe is cut off in case he says too much. Maybe he got a bullet in the back of the head from Paul Kinnerk or John Kiley just there as he was about to say too much. But so this weekend, where do you think Waterford can get at Limerick? Look, we know that Limerick are a team for all seasons and all occasions, but like, if you're looking at that Waterford team, what are the strengths that you can lean on?
Well, I think we've got to move the ball into space quickly. We can't afford to get caught in traffic, and we can't afford to carry the ball into contact. If we do that, we'll be in trouble. Now, to be honest, and this is not condescending Waterford in any way, if Limerick have had their A game on Sunday, they're going to win the match. That's the bottom line, because that's how good they are. But you'd be always hoping, they've come through a very good league. They've found a few players. You'd be hoping that they might, that they might be a little bit off colour. If that should happen, we've got a chance. We've got to take every single chance we get. And we've got to defend really, really well. And we've got to walk the ball through the lines. We've got to have loads of energy. And significantly on Sunday, there'll come a time in the game when Waterford players will be run out of energy. Will the 5 players that we bring off the bench, will they be able to make an impact? Because that will need to happen if we're going to have a chance.
Joe, we had some commenters in there speculating that maybe John Kiley or Paul Kinnerk cut you off there in case you said too much about Limerick hurling.
Yeah, would you believe it's easily known championships on the way? I had the phone up on the steering wheel and it overheated. So there's a sign that championship is on the way. Yeah, just go back. Look, to be fair to Limerick, and people say about the marvellous game plans, they do the basics of the game better and quicker than everyone else. Okay, it sounds simplistic, but okay, the way teams are coached in the game, at the end of the day, hurling hasn't changed. It's get the ball, move it to a better position, put it over the bar or run into the net. So the way it's been done is different, but the same thing, you're still striking, you're still catching, you're still hand passing, despite everyone thinking that we don't hand pass in Limerick, that we just throw the ball. We've just what did I say? The hand is quicker than the eye. I think that's what's catching us at the moment. Quick hands. But the game as a basic game has not changed. But it seems that the Limerick lads are just doing it quicker and better than everyone else at the moment. It will change. Someone will come up with a tactical plan. It's not the same as Michael, you know, from coaching football for years. It's not a game you can have too many set plays, because especially these days, I can deliver a ball 100 yards into a fella's hand, and your set play of off the shoulder or your 3-man weave or your blanket defence can be shot straight away with one delivery. So I don't know how teams are going to get at him. Will they be got at this year? I don't know. As they say, past performance is a sure sign of future results, but we're around long enough, all of us, to know that it's sport. Any team can be beaten.
Is there anything about this Sunday that you're worried about from a Waterford point of view? Some area where they could, Desi Hutchinson's obviously had a couple of good games against Limerick in recent times. But Joe, is there anything you're worried about?
Listen, I'll go back to what I said. That bunch of lads that I had, the Waterford team were every bit as good, if not better on some occasions. It was 50-50. Michael alluded to it there. Waterford don't go from... No, I think it was a crazy statement that Derek McGrath made there last year, that anyone who beats Waterford will win the All-Ireland. So there was 3 or 4 All-Ireland winners last year. But they didn't go from being the second best team in the country to be an overnight loser. They still have unbelievable talent. Have they as good a hurlers as Limerick? Yeah. They're possibly even better hurlers than Limerick. But I think just Limerick are just that bit down the line. Their understanding of the game, the way I suppose Paul Kinnerk has them coached. Like, there's a huge difference between training a team and coaching a team. Anybody can train a team. But it's just, if you can get a bunch of lads that believe in you, that will try what you want them to do, but you're also explaining to them exactly why they're doing it. Do you know what the result is? Look, the perfect example of it is the goal there in the league final. James Flanagan, 99 players out of 100 would have shown a little jinx and gone for the strike himself. He didn't. He passed it over to Gillan, who he knew if he caught it would have been bottled up and wouldn't have had as free a strike as Seamus had. But sure, he knew by passing it to Gillan. Gillan had only one thing in his mind, that was put it into the net. Do you know?
Yeah,
to be fair, I think teams are getting too caught up in trying to beat Limerick instead of worrying about their own camps.
Yeah. Michael, Davy Fitz obviously took over. Liam Cal, he left and took over Tip straight away. What did you make of that whole little changeover, the way that happened, and how has Davy Fitz gone down so far in Waterford?
Well, I suppose every manager comes in, you're going to get a bounce, and he'd be very familiar with Waterford hurling. No question about that. That probably gives him an advantage. He'd be very familiar. I think, are you going to take it off there, Joe? I see that steering wheel popping up there. I'm getting a bit worried. But look, he'd be very familiar with Waterford hurling. And to be honest, and this is not condescending to Davy in any way, when Davy got the Waterford job, there wasn't exactly a queue down the street looking for it. So he deserves to be supported. He deserves to get a chance. He has plans in place. It'll be interesting to see will they work. As you know, the best hurlers are on the ditch. Everybody has the answers at 5 o'clock or 5:30 when the game is over. And he's put a system in place. He says he's reasonably happy with it. I would expect Waterford to be very, very fit. I saw some of the training, and they trained really, really hard. Now, they would have trained really hard under Liam Cal as well. So, you know, he knows what this is about. He knows how to win big matches. He knows how to deal with players. A lot of the players, I read a piece with Joe Canning during the week, or I heard the piece, Joe's. A lot of the players who are playing under Davy speak very highly of him. That's the best test of all. So, you know, just a challenge. But sure, Davy loves a challenge. He was made for challenges. But this is the biggest challenge he ever faced.
And did you find it unusual this weekend that we've got Tony Brown in the Tipperary camp and Owen Kelly of Tip in the Waterford camp?
Yeah, that's certainly interesting. All right, there's no question about that. And I would know Owen Kelly well because I managed Mullinahone back in 2009, and a really good guy, and probably the best player I ever saw in a dressing room before a match. I mean, he was so positive. I think he'll go on to make a great manager in time to come and a really good coach. That's interesting as well because I actually met Tony Brown's father the other night at a funeral, and Tony seen I just chatting about that, and he just said it's just mad the way things go. But look, Tony got an opportunity in Tip, Owen got an opportunity in Waterford, and why not?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll move on to the other match for a minute, Tipperary against Clare. Joe, how would you see that going?
Tip are rebuilding. No doubt Liam will have them hopping, will have them right. They're largely untested, I suppose. They're coming from a low ebb last year. I think the pressure is on Clare on this one. After their performance against Limerick last year, and they felt they were so close. and then I suppose they kind of died out in a whimper. Then in the All Ireland series, so I suppose this is, to me, it would be more pressure on Clare. It could be a shootout to see who comes third or second, possibly. If we're going on the form book, okay, if I said that Limerick aren't in the top, you'll all stop laughing. But let's go on the form book. Limerick should top it. Then you've tipped Clare, Cork, Waterford. Jesus, like, you lose one match, you're under pressure straight away. You know, and let's be realistic about it. If Tip win or Clare win, whoever loses will go, right, we've one match lost. There's a chance we're going in now playing Limerick, we'll probably lose another one.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So I think this weekend is going to be far more important for Tip and Clare than it would be for Waterford. If Waterford do lose, okay, we've lost, but we've lost to the team that everybody expects to top the group. Now we're in a dogfight to finish second or third. Whereas if Clare or Tip lose, okay, we've lost, and we still have to play the top team in the competition. So I think it's hugely important for them. I could be wrong. It could be a qualification decider when you look back in it in 6 weeks' time.
Yeah, no, I think you make a very fair point there. How do you see this game going, Michael? You've got some, superstar forwards there. Tony Kelly, of course, Aidan McCarthy's back this year. Mark Rogers is back. On the Tipperary side, Jake Morris, he can light it up. Jason Ford and so on. What way do you see this going?
Well, Liam has come in Tipperary, and certainly he'll get a bounce out of him. He's trying to blend the young and the old, and then some of those Tipperary fellas have been around a long time, and you have a lot of miles on the clock. And I've no doubt that they'll contribute on the big day. If I was to get a free bet, I'd probably go for a draw on this one. But having said that, if you push me to pick a winner on this game, I'd probably go with Tipperary on the basis that I think David Fitzgerald is going to be a big loss to Clare. I mean, he's not alone is he a big man around the pitch. He can get scores. He's very involved in play. He's always able to take the ball out of defence. It's a big test for either, and it's probably a more important game from the point of view of, as Joe said a while ago, there is a chance that Limerick will win the 4 games. So then, if that is to happen, and that's not guaranteed, it will make every other single game absolutely crucial and vital. So the loser of that game, particularly from Clare's point of view, if they are to lose a home game against Tipperary, they'll be under pressure straight away. And so that's going to be, there's an awful lot of stake in that match. There's a lot of stake in the other match as well, but there's an awful lot of stake because the winners of that game will be in a very good position and the losers will have a bit of catching up to do. Now, Tip were very impressive until they met Limerick, and they were very impressive in the first half of the Limerick game. But then it was as if you hit a light switch. Limerick just took off, went into a different zone, different planet. And, it showed really what they were made of. And so this is a massive game in Ennis. Clare don't lose many games in Ennis, but I think Tip have a realistic chance to turn him over.
Joe, actually, just a point that was made there about Limerick that Michael just made there. Early in the second half, Tipperary were wiped out by Limerick. And Limerick have this habit of taking over the third quarters of games. And then they kind of seem to, I don't know, did they pull up the handbrake towards the end of the games? But in a lot of games, Cork, Tip, Galway, Kilkenny, they all had very strong fourth quarters. But the game was kind of gone already. Is this Limerick kind of, like, what do they do that they're taking over those third quarters? Teams can't keep with them, and then they seem to just kind of freewheel to the end line.
Okay, it's like, to me, it looks like a game of chess. Okay, whoever we're playing, right, you tear away there for the first 15 minutes. We'll see what you're doing. We'll drag ourselves back into it. We'll reset at half time, and then bang. They just hit the boost button. And to be fair in the league, I called it from early on. Like, I know Cork beat them, but for 45 minutes, Limerick were the masters. And every match, okay, the time went to 50 minutes, probably 55 later than that. You knew they were in a training block. They started to tire, probably after between 45 and 55 minutes in a lot of the games. So that was where, I suppose, the third quarter was really the place that they expended all their energy. And the last 10 minutes, they'd empty the bench then, and lads were tired and stuff. Like, you have to remember as well through the league, I'd say on average, were they playing maybe 9, 10 starters at any one. That's all they played at any one time. I don't think the starting 15 ever took to the field. So I suppose that's something you have to look at as well. As Michael said earlier on, the article by Garrod, I got a fright, Michael, when I saw how many players have left the panel and have been replaced between retirements and being not on the panel anymore. And it's the bench that's fighting. Now, some people might say, oh God, they're very dependent on their starting 15. But if you have a bench absolutely fighting to make it 26, then if you lose someone after 15, it doesn't seem to affect it that badly. You know, like you watch Graham Mulcahy is a perfect example, hasn't been seen at all this year. Could Graham Mulcahy have a say in the championship? Quite possibly. You know, they've them lads in reserve and that experience. You know, but as I say, I wouldn't like to be a coach going out against them. I say the psychological effect, no matter how good a psychologist you have or how strong-minded you are, if you take a lead on Limerick and you're going in at half-time, you're straight away coming out in the second half worried what's going to happen. Then if you do get hit a blitz, you start to doubt yourself, and that feeds down through the whole thing. So I think myself, it's a psychological thing, barrier now, that any of the rest of the counties need to get over. Because if they don't get over that, they're wasting their time. Because are Limerick the 15 best hurlers in the country? No. Are they the best team in the country and the best squad in the country? Yes.
And just to put you on the spot a little bit and ask you to do a bit of Mystic Meg, I'll start off with you, Joe. Who are the 3 teams that are going to get out of Munster?
Oh, I think Limerick, Tip and Waterford.
Interesting. What do you think, Michael?
Limerick, Tip, and it's down to Waterford and Cork. And that'll be decided in that particular game. I'd like to think Waterford had a good chance as well. Yeah, just one thing that we spoke about the Limerick panel. I think Limerick have replaced a lot of players during the course of the championship. They've replaced Cian Lynch. They've replaced the fullback. I think they have 2 or 3 players who are absolutely irreplaceable. The keeper is irreplaceable. I mean, they tried a sub-keeper in the league, and I know it's only the league, and he's a young fella probably starting off. Nicky Quaid is irreplaceable. From his composure, from his puck outs, the way he organises his backs. If anything were to happen to Nicky Quaid, that would be a serious blow. Declan Hannon is an absolute key player on that team. An absolute key player. And the third player, I think, believe it or not, is Gillane. I think Gillane is irreplaceable. Because he gives him something extra up front. He can win his own ball. They try different free takers. Hasn't really worked. So if anything were to happen, any of those 3 players, they would be. And I'm not wishing him ill in any particular way. That would be game changers. But, you know, and a fella gets them sent off, anything can happen. And Limerick have really tidied up their discipline on the pitch now. I mean, you know, over the years there was a few loose strokes going around. I think they've improved that aspect of their game dramatically. And, you know, what a team. But the couple, there's a lot of hurling to be played, and anything can happen. And that's what makes hurling the game it is. As Joe said a while ago, the ball can go 70 or 80 yards, bang, a hook, a block, a ricochet. Anything can change the course of a game, a refereeing decision. There's an awful lot to play for, and there's an awful lot to look forward to.
Well, look, lads, it's been brilliant stuff altogether. Really appreciate you both giving us your time. But Joe, just your predictions for this weekend?
I'll go Tip and Limerick.
Tip and Limerick. Michael?
I hate to say against Waterford, but you'd have to say Limerick. And also, I think Tip will shade it in this.
Lads, really, really appreciate it. Enjoy the weekend of hurling, and hopefully we'll chat again soon.
You're welcome.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Joe. Mind yourself. Take care.
All the best, Michael. Bye.